Noah Carter had always been a man of certainties. Certainty that hard work was the foundation of a dignified life. Certainty that his family's love was unshakable. Certainty that with strength and determination, he could overcome any challenge. But there he was, lying in a hospital bed, tubes connected to his body, the cold light of fluorescent bulbs illuminating his weary face, and all those certainties seemed as fragile as his own body. He stared at the window, the gray sky mirroring his mood. A pile of papers lay beside the bed, growing medical bills, reports on treatments that didn't always bring good news. But what weighed on him the most was the silence. An oppressive emptiness that had settled since Amanda and Emily's last visit. He remembered that afternoon as if it were a movie playing in his mind. Amanda sat on the chair next to the bed, her hands folded in her lap. Her eyes, once a source of comfort, were now cold, almost impersonal. "Noah, this is killing Emily," she finally said, breaking the silence. "Killing Emily?" Noah repeated, his voice hoarse from coughing. "Amanda, I'm here, fighting for my life. You're all I have. How can you give up now?" Amanda avoided his gaze. She always did that when she wanted to dodge direct confrontation. It's not fair to her, Noah. She's so young. She needs stability, normalcy. "And I need you," he insisted. But his voice failed him, not just from the illness, but from the awareness that he had already lost this battle. Amanda held his hand for a moment, but there was no warmth in the gesture. "I'm sorry," she said before letting go of his fingers and standing up. Emily lingered at the door, hesitant. She was 20 but looked so small at that moment. "Dad, she couldn't finish the sentence. She simply lowered her head and followed her mother. The sound of the door closing felt like an echo of something that would never return. The weeks that followed were a blur of pain and despair. Noah felt like dead weight. There was no one to bring him a smile, no one to hold his hand when the pain from the treatment became unbearable. In his darkest moments, he questioned whether continuing the fight was even worth it. One night, in one of those desolate moments, he met David Harper. The nurse entered the room with a modest smile and a steaming mug of tea in his hands. "You look like someone who needs something stronger than 4 fluids," he said, placing the mug on the table next to the bed. Noah looked at him without responding. David, however, wasn't offended. "You know, tea won't cure cancer, but it helps the soul bear the burden. Try it." Reluctantly, Noah took a sip. It wasn't just the tea, it was the gesture. A small spark of humanity that somehow pierced the void. David wasn't just an efficient nurse. He had a biting sense of humor that made Noah laugh, even through the pain. "You know what's worse than cancer?" David asked one day. "What?" Noah replied, frowning. "Vegan diets," David said with the most serious expression. It was silly humor, but for Noah, it felt like medicine. Over time, David became more than a professional, he was a friend. Someone who believed Noah could win, even when Noah didn't believe it himself. Months passed, and surprisingly, the treatments began to work. The doctors were cautious about celebrating, but Noah felt something different. It was as if every small victory, a slightly better test result, a pain-free night, was a brick in rebuilding something he didn't even know was missing. When he was finally discharged, spring was arriving. The trees outside the hospital had small green buds, signs that life always finds a way to continue. Returning home was bittersweet. The house felt enormous and empty. The smell of old wood mixed with forgotten memories brought a lump to his throat. There were still photos on the shelves, Emily at 12, with a shy smile. Amanda in a summer dress, laughing beside him. He thought about taking down those photos but decided to leave them. They were a reminder of what he had lost, but also of what he wanted to rebuild. That first night home, Noah sat on his bed and stared at the ceiling. "I survived," he whispered to himself. But there was something more. A new flame was beginning to burn. He didn't know what it was yet, but one thing was clear, this wasn't over. Noah Carter didn't know where to start. The idea of rebuilding his life was both liberating and terrifying. He wasn't just burdened with medical debt but also the weight of a past that followed him like shadows he couldn't escape. The weeks after his discharge were spent organizing the chaos. He spent his days making endless phone calls to the hospital, insurance companies, and banks, trying to understand how he could deal with the accumulated expenses. It was during one of those calls that Rebecca Morgan's name appeared for the first time. "Mr. Carter," said a firm and professional voice on the other end of the line. "My name is Rebecca Morgan. I received your request for assistance with your medical debts. I'm an attorney specializing in financial litigation, and I'd like to schedule a free consultation to discuss your situation." Noah hesitated. He didn't have the money for a lawyer, but Rebecca assured him the first meeting was just a conversation. "If we can't help you, you owe us nothing," she concluded. 2 days later, Noah met Rebecca at a small office in the oldest part of the city. She was young, perhaps in her early 30s, with piercing brown eyes and an energy that exuded both confidence and empathy. "Let's get straight to the point," Rebecca said as she flipped through the documents Noah had brought. "You've been overcharged by the hospital. We can contest part of this. As for the rest, I can help you negotiate." "And how much does this help cost?" Noah asked, his voice tinged with skepticism. Rebecca gave a slight smile. "I usually charge a percentage of what we manage to reduce, but in your case," she closed the folder and looked directly at him. "I've seen your medical history. No one should go through what you went through. Let's solve this first, and we'll talk about payment later." Her sincerity disarmed him. For the first time in a long while, Noah felt like someone was willing to help him without expecting something in return. In the weeks that followed, Rebecca became a constant presence in Noah's life. She didn't just handle his financial issues, she also became a source of emotional support. During one meeting, while they were reviewing the terms of a settlement with the hospital, Noah opened up. "I used to think I was indestructible," he said, staring out the window of the small office. "But cancer, abandonment, it was like being hit by a truck." Rebecca stopped writing and looked at him attentively. "You beat cancer, Noah. That already says a lot about who you are." He shook his head. "I beat it, but I lost everything in the process." Rebecca hesitated before saying, "Maybe you didn't lose everything. Sometimes what we think is an end is just the beginning of something different. Something better." It was a short conversation, but it stayed with Noah for days. He didn't know why exactly, but he felt at ease with Rebecca. She was practical, focused, but there was something else. A genuine empathy he hadn't felt since Amanda and Emily had left him. As his financial situation began to stabilize, Noah decided to take small steps toward something new. He started reaching out to old contacts in the business world, people he had worked with before his life fell apart. A former colleague connected him with a group of entrepreneurs who needed strategic guidance. That's how Noah began working as a consultant, using his knowledge to help other business owners avoid the mistakes he had made in the past. The work brought more than money, it brought purpose. Slowly, Noah began to feel like himself again. But the ghost of the past continued to haunt him. He didn't know why, but he started looking for information about Amanda and Emily. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was something deeper. It was a mutual friend who told him about their situation. Amanda had lost her job. Emily, who had started college with such enthusiasm, was now working part-time to help with the bills. They had moved to a smaller house in a less affluent neighborhood. The news stirred a mix of emotions in Noah. Part of him felt a bitter sense of justice. They had abandoned him, and now they were facing the consequences. But another part still cared. One night, while dining with Rebecca at a simple restaurant in the city, he shared what he had discovered. "Amanda and Emily, they're struggling," he said, pushing his food around on his plate without really eating. Rebecca raised her eyes. "And how do you feel about that?" Noah was silent for a moment. "I don't know. Part of me wants to forget, to move on. But another part wants, I don't know, to test if they really cared about me or if they were only around when it was convenient." Rebecca placed her fork down and crossed her arms. "And how do you plan to do that?" It was in that moment the idea emerged. Not clearly or fully articulated, but as a spark. Noah explained that he wanted to understand whether Amanda and Emily's love was genuine or just rooted in self-interest. He spoke of his hurt, of his need for answers. Rebecca listened attentively, but when he finished, she said something he didn't expect. "You need to make sure this isn't just about revenge. Because if it is, you'll never find peace." Her words stayed with him. He knew Rebecca was right, but he also knew he needed to do something. Not to hurt them, but to find a way to close that chapter of his life. Noah Carter wasn't someone who acted impulsively. The plan forming in his mind wasn't born out of a momentary desire for revenge. It was something deeper, more calculated. He needed answers, closure that had been denied to him for so long. But to achieve that, he knew he would need Rebecca's help. A week after the dinner where he had first shared his intentions, Noah and Rebecca sat in his living room. The late afternoon light streamed through the windows, illuminating the piles of documents Rebecca had brought with her. "So," she began, flipping through a notepad. "You want to fake your death? I must say, this isn't something I usually advocate." "It's not just about faking my death," Noah replied, adjusting himself on the couch. "It's about understanding. Knowing if what Amanda and Emily did was out of necessity, fear, or if they truly never cared." Rebecca stared at him for a long moment before responding. "I understand why you want this. But you realize that if this isn't executed perfectly, it could backfire in ways we can't even imagine?" "I know," Noah said firmly. "That's why I need your help." In the days that followed, Rebecca began shaping the plan, setting up the legal parameters that would make everything credible. "The first thing," she explained, "is to ensure that your death is never formally registered. We'll use the term presumed deceased, based on a medical certificate signed by a doctor, but without an official death certificate." "Is that even possible?" Noah asked. "It's a gray area, but legally feasible, especially if no official death certificate is filed in public records. We'll also need someone in the medical field to back this up." That's when Noah thought of David Harper. The nurse had become more than a friend. He was one of the few people Noah completely trusted. When Noah explained the plan to David, his initial reaction was shock. "So, you want me to help you fake your death?" David asked incredulously. "It's not about faking," Noah explained. "It's about finding the truth. And you, better than anyone, know what I've been through." David scratched his head thoughtfully. "Well, I can't say this is the most ethical thing I've ever done, but if it's going to help you move on, I'm in." With Rebecca handling the legal aspects and David ensuring a believable medical angle, the next step was crafting the narrative of Noah's death. Rebecca suggested something simple and straightforward. "We'll say you suffered a medical complication related to cancer." It's not only plausible but also explains the lack of a traditional funeral. Noah, however, was more concerned about Amanda and Emily's reaction. "Do you think they'll believe it?" "If you let me draft the notification, they won't have any reason to doubt it," Rebecca said, grabbing a notebook to jot down ideas. "We'll send a formal letter to Amanda, explaining that you left a significant inheritance but that she'll need to come to the city to address the legal details." Rebecca looked at him over her glasses. "And then, Noah, we'll see who Amanda and Emily really are." Over the following weeks, the plan came to life. Rebecca wrote a detailed letter addressed to Amanda, explaining Noah's death and mentioning the existence of an inheritance. The document was carefully crafted to be convincing, while also including subtle hints that Rebecca knew Amanda would interpret as an opportunity. David, for his part, helped create a fictitious medical history with details to support the narrative. "If anyone asks, you developed a severe infection that led to fatal complications," he explained. "It's common enough in patients who've undergone extensive treatments like yours." When everything was ready, Noah sent the letter to Amanda and Emily's address. He knew they were struggling financially, and though he felt a twinge of compassion, it was also what made the plan viable. The inheritance was the bait he knew Amanda couldn't resist. The response came less than a week later. Amanda called Rebecca directly, demanding more information. "I didn't know Noah had left an inheritance," Amanda said, her voice controlled but loaded with interest. "What exactly did he leave behind?" "That's something that will need to be discussed in person," Rebecca responded firmly. "I suggest you and your daughter come to the city so we can clarify all the details." After the call, Rebecca hung up and looked at Noah, who was sitting in the armchair beside her. "And now?" she asked. "Now," Noah said, "we wait to see who Amanda and Emily truly are." Amanda Taylor didn't like uncertainty, but the letter she had received about Noah Carter's supposed inheritance was impossible to ignore. She tried not to show her anxiety, especially in front of Emily. The drive to the city had been quiet. Mother and daughter exchanged few words. Amanda knew Emily was reluctant, but she herself had a clear goal: to secure whatever she could from the inheritance. After everything she had endured, she felt she deserved some form of compensation. When they arrived at Noah's old house, Amanda felt a chill. It wasn't just the worn appearance of the place, it was the memory of the man who had once called it home. She took a deep breath and stepped out of the car. Emily hesitated, staring at the house as if expecting something from the past to emerge. Before they could enter, a tall woman with a firm posture and a professional demeanor stepped out the front door. It was Rebecca Morgan, the lawyer responsible for the letter. She wore an immaculate pantsuit, and her evaluative gaze moved from Amanda to Emily. "Mrs. Taylor," Rebecca said, extending her hand. "I'm Rebecca Morgan. Thank you for coming." Amanda shook her hand, trying to mask her nervousness. "I expected something more formal," she remarked, referring to the lack of an office or legal setting. Rebecca didn't smile. "I prefer to address sensitive matters in a familiar environment whenever possible. Besides, I thought it might be more appropriate for you to visit the house before any discussions." Emily stepped forward. "So, what exactly happened to my dad?" she asked, her voice shaky but curious. Rebecca hesitated just enough to make her pause seem genuine. "Your father experienced medical complications related to his cancer. It was quick, but I believe he was at peace." The words hit Emily palpably. Her eyes filled with tears, but she quickly looked away toward the house. "Can we go inside?" she asked, almost in a whisper. Rebecca nodded and opened the door for them. "Of course. I'll accompany you. Some things may bring back memories, but I think it's important for you to see what he left behind." The house was a dive into the past. Amanda hadn't been there since the day she left, and Emily hadn't seen her father since the moment she hesitantly walked out the door. The walls were adorned with photos of happy moments: Emily's 8th birthday party, a picnic in the park, Noah holding a Businessman of the Year award. For Amanda, the images were a painful reminder of the man she had left behind. For Emily, they revealed a father she barely knew. Rebecca led them to the living room, where a small pile of Noah's personal items was laid out. "These are personal belongings he asked to be preserved for you. I thought it would be best to start here." Amanda walked to the table and picked up a framed family photo. "He kept this?" she asked, surprised. In the picture, she and Noah were embracing, with Emily between them, laughing. It was a moment that seemed to belong to another lifetime. Meanwhile, Emily found a leather-bound notebook. When she opened it, she realized it was a journal. The first pages detailed Noah's days in the hospital. He wrote about the fear, the pain, and, most of all, the emptiness of being alone. One line stood out to her: "Emily has always been my light. I don't understand how she could leave me." "I didn't know he wrote," Emily said, more to herself than anyone else. Rebecca watched her closely, noting how the young woman seemed increasingly affected. Amanda, on the other hand, maintained her composure. "So, about the inheritance," she began, turning to Rebecca. "How long will it take to resolve this?" Rebecca remained unfazed. "We still need to discuss the legal details, but it's important for you to understand that what Noah left behind isn't just financial. He wanted you to reflect on what he meant in your lives." Amanda raised an eyebrow. "What does that mean?" He left conditions? Let's just say he believed certain matters needed resolution before any distribution, Rebecca replied carefully, choosing her words deliberately. She knew Amanda would react poorly to the idea of not having full control. Emily, still holding the journal, leafed through more pages. The more she read, the more she realized how much her father had suffered, and, worse, how little she had known about it. "Why didn't he try to bring us back?" she asked suddenly. Rebecca turned to her. "Have you ever asked why he would need to? Maybe he expected you to come back on your own." Emily closed the journal, her eyes fixed on the floor. Amanda scoffed. "This isn't a courtroom, Ms. Morgan. We're here to discuss the inheritance, not to be judged." Rebecca kept her composure. "And we are discussing it. But it's my responsibility to ensure Noah's wishes are respected." Outside, Noah watched everything from a distance. He was in a car parked down the street, the windows tinted. He observed as Rebecca guided Amanda and Emily through the house, analyzing every gesture, every expression. It was like watching a play where he was both the director and the audience. He noticed something he hadn't anticipated. While Amanda seemed only interested in the inheritance, Emily was clearly grappling with something deeper. She held the journal as if it were a shield, protecting her from something she didn't want to face. Noah felt a pang in his chest. He hadn't expected this to be easy, but he was beginning to realize the plan might have consequences he hadn't considered. Amanda Taylor wasn't the type to wait for things to come to her. After visiting Noah's house and hearing Rebecca's evasive explanations about the inheritance, she made a decision: she would take the case to court. She didn't want to waste time with emotional games. For her, the priority was ensuring that she and Emily received what she believed was rightfully theirs. Emily, however, hesitated. Reading Noah's journal had shaken her understanding of her father and, for the first time, she began questioning her mother's decisions. "Why didn't you talk to him?" Emily asked one night, as they prepared documents for the lawyer. "When we left him, why didn't you at least explain?" Amanda sighed, visibly irritated. "Emily, we've been through this. I did what I had to do. He was dragging us down with him. I had to protect you." "Protect me from what? From seeing him fight? From being a present daughter when he needed me most?" Emily shot back, her voice laced with anger. "I wasn't a child anymore. I could have made my own choice." Amanda slammed the laptop shut and looked directly at Emily. "Do you think it was easy for me? Packing our things and walking out of that hospital knowing he was begging us to stay? You don't understand, Emily. I had to be strong." Emily didn't respond. She picked up Noah's journal, which she had been reading repeatedly since finding it, and locked herself in her room. There, away from her mother's gaze, she let the tears flow. The words Noah had written echoed in her mind. "I don't understand why Amanda gave up, but Emily, she was always my reason to fight. Does she know that?" The following week, Amanda initiated formal proceedings to claim the inheritance. Rebecca, meanwhile, seemed to always be one step ahead. During preparations for the hearing, she kept Noah informed of every detail. He listened carefully, but something began to trouble him. "Emily is different," he remarked during one of their meetings. "It seems like she's feeling the weight of this. Maybe she's not as much to blame as I thought." Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "Are you changing your mind about the plan?" "Not exactly," Noah replied hesitantly. "But I'm starting to think I should be focusing more on Amanda and less on Emily." "That's a decision you'll need to make at the right moment," Rebecca said. "But I promise, in court, the truth will have its chance to come out." The day of the hearing arrived. Amanda entered the courtroom with firm steps, wearing an expression that blended determination and annoyance. Emily stood beside her, her demeanor more reserved. The judge, a middle-aged woman with sharp, observant eyes, began the session. Rebecca, representing the deceased Noah, was ready to present her case. Rebecca started by presenting financial documents and medical records that supported the narrative of Noah's struggles before his death. She outlined the costs of his treatment and how he had tried to stay afloat while dealing with the absence of his family. The records show that Mr. Carter faced extreme physical and emotional hardship during his battle with cancer, Rebecca said, looking directly at Amanda. Yet, even so, he left clear instructions to notify his ex-wife and daughter about his inheritance. He believed that, despite the separation, there was still a bond between them. Amanda didn't react, her face impassive as Rebecca continued. Emily, however, appeared increasingly uncomfortable. When it was Amanda's turn to speak, she adopted a defensive stance. My relationship with Noah ended when he stopped being the man I knew, she began. I had to make hard choices to protect my daughter. Everything I did was for her. Emily avoided her gaze, but the judge didn't miss it. And you, Miss Taylor? The judge asked, turning to Emily. How do you see the situation now? Emily hesitated before answering. I don't know. I thought I understood, but, after reading my dad's journal, I'm not sure of anything anymore. Rebecca sensed this was the moment. She requested to present something that had been withheld until then. With the court's permission, I'd like to introduce a new element to the case. Proceed, said the judge. Rebecca signaled toward the courtroom door. All eyes turned as the door opened, and Noah walked in. The murmurs that followed were almost deafening. Amanda stood up, her eyes wide. Is this some kind of joke? She asked, incredulous. Emily, on the other hand, froze, unable to process what she was seeing. Noah walked to the front of the courtroom, with Rebecca by his side. He turned to the judge and said, I apologize for this deception, Your Honor. But the truth needed to come out. Amanda began to protest, but the judge raised a hand for silence. Noah faced Amanda and Emily. I needed to know, he said, his voice firm but emotional. I needed to understand whether what you did was out of necessity or convenience. Amanda, you always justified your actions as protecting Emily. But Emily, did you believe that too? Emily shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I don't know, Dad. I was young, and I just went along with what Mom said. Noah felt the weight of her words but maintained his composure. And now? What do you think now? Emily tried to speak, but her voice faltered. Amanda, however, finally exploded. This is ridiculous. You manipulated us. You pretended to be dead just to put us through this? Manipulated? Noah retorted, his voice rising. You abandoned me at the worst moment of my life. I almost died alone because you decided I was a burden. The judge intervened, calling for order, but the tension in the room was palpable. Rebecca stepped forward. Your Honor, I believe Mr. Carter's intentions are now clear. He wasn't seeking financial justice. He was seeking the truth. The courtroom fell silent. After Noah's unexpected entrance and the emotional confrontation that followed, everyone waited for his next words. Amanda looked furious, as if betrayed in a game she thought she was winning. Emily, however, seemed deeply shaken. Her hunched posture and tearful eyes reflected the internal battle she was fighting. Noah took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. He had spent months planning this moment, but now that he was here, face to face with the people who had abandoned him, the reality felt far heavier. I know what I did wasn't conventional, he began, addressing the judge. But this wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity. I needed to know who truly cared for me and why. The judge regarded him seriously but did not interrupt. Rebecca, standing beside him, gave a subtle nod of encouragement. Noah turned to Amanda. You justified leaving me by saying you were protecting Emily, but that wasn't the whole truth, was it? It was also about you. About how my illness complicated your life. That's not true, Amanda said sharply, her anger evident. I did what I thought was right. Right for who? Noah countered, his voice firm. I was dying, Amanda. I needed support, and you left me. I wasn't asking for a sacrifice, just for a little compassion. Amanda crossed her arms but remained silent. The anger on her face couldn't hide her discomfort under the scrutiny. Then Noah turned to Emily. His tone softened, but the emotion was still heavy. And you, Emily. You left because you thought I wouldn't make it. I get that, in a way. You were young. But deep down, I always hoped you would come back. Emily finally looked up at him, tears streaking her face. I wanted to, Dad. I swear I did. But Mom convinced me you didn't want me to see you like that. And then, it just felt too late. Noah felt a pang in his chest. He wanted to shout that it was never too late, but he restrained himself. You read my journal. You know it didn't matter how I looked or how sick I was. I just wanted my daughter near me. Emily nodded, unable to speak. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken feelings, until Rebecca stepped in. Your Honor, it's clear this case isn't just about material possessions. It's about the emotional impact of the choices everyone here made. Noah Carter sought answers, and now he has them. The next step is to determine how this inheritance should be handled. The judge sighed, her expression thoughtful as she weighed the emotional weight of the situation. Mr. Carter, the court understands that your approach was unconventional. However, the law is clear regarding the disposition of assets. The final decision rests with you. Noah glanced at Rebecca, who gave him a reassuring nod. He knew what he needed to do. My decision is as follows, Noah began, turning to Amanda and Emily. Amanda, you will receive nothing from my inheritance. You made your choices, and now you'll have to live with the consequences. Amanda opened her mouth to protest, but the judge raised her hand for silence. Emily, Noah continued, his voice softer. You're still my daughter. There's still time to rebuild something between us. But that depends on you. I'll put your share of the inheritance into a trust, which you can only access after we've worked together to rebuild our relationship. Emily sobbed, nodding. Thank you, Dad. I want that. Amanda left the courtroom in silence. Her expression was no longer one of anger but of defeat. The weight of her choices seemed to have finally caught up with her. Emily, however, stayed behind, standing beside Noah and Rebecca after the session. I'm so sorry for everything, Emily said, looking at her father. For not being there. For believing what Mom said. I'm sorry too, Noah replied, touching her shoulder gently. But we can start over. If that's what you want. It is, Emily said firmly. I want that. In the weeks following the trial, Noah began working with Rebecca to reorganize his life and ensure that Emily had the support she needed, albeit with clear boundaries. They started meeting regularly, discussing not just the past but also the future. Emily even began attending therapy, something Noah suggested and she accepted with gratitude. Amanda, on the other hand, disappeared from their lives. Rebecca heard rumors that she was trying to start fresh in another city, but Noah had no interest in finding out more. For him, the chapter with Amanda was closed, and he didn't feel the need to offer forgiveness. Moving on was enough. Noah Carter's house had never felt so alive. The walls, once witnesses to silence and loneliness, now echoed with laughter and conversation. It was a sunny day, and Noah was in the garden, pruning a bush he had neglected for far too long. Rebecca watched from the porch, a smile on her face as she leafed through a book. Beside her, Emily sketched in a notebook, her eyes focused and serene. The scene was simple, but for Noah, it felt almost unreal. He had spent so much time trapped in the void left by abandonment that the idea of having a family by his side again seemed impossible. And yet, there they were, his daughter and Rebecca, both part of a new chapter he never thought he'd live to see. After the trial, the weeks that followed were a test of patience and understanding. Emily began visiting regularly, asking questions about the past and offering apologies that felt genuine to Noah. You don't need to apologize all the time, he told her one afternoon as they sipped coffee in the kitchen. I've already accepted that you were a victim of all this too. But I feel like I need to, Emily replied. Because I didn't do anything to fight what was happening. I just let it happen. We all make mistakes, Noah said. What matters is what we do with the chances we get afterward. From then on, things began to improve. Emily continued with therapy, which helped her process years of pent-up emotions. She also started reconnecting with her passions, things she had abandoned when she left college. Drawing was one of those passions, and Noah was surprised to discover her talent. Rebecca, meanwhile, became an unwavering source of stability for Noah. After the stress of the plan and the trial, she insisted they take some time for themselves. They spent a weekend away from the city in a quiet cabin, where Noah finally allowed himself to breathe and process everything that had happened. "You're amazing," he told her as they watched the sunset together. "I don't know how I would have done this without you." Rebecca smiled. "You would have found the way. But I'm glad I could help." Their relationship grew deeper. Rebecca was a partner in every sense, balancing the pragmatism of her profession with the empathy Noah so deeply admired. Noah used part of his inheritance to establish a foundation supporting cancer patients facing financial hardship. To his surprise, Emily volunteered to help. "I want this to work," she said. "And I want to be part of something that truly matters." The work brought them closer together. Slowly, family meetings became natural, and Noah realized that while there were still scars, they wouldn't define the future. On that sunny afternoon in the garden, as he looked at Rebecca and Emily, Noah felt something he hadn't experienced in years: peace. He knew life would never be perfect, but it didn't need to be. What mattered was that, after everything, he had found a new purpose, a new family, and a new chance to be happy. He set down his pruning shears and joined them on the porch. "What are you drawing?" he asked Emily. She turned the notebook toward him, revealing a sketch of the garden with all three of them included. "Our future," she said with a shy smile. Noah looked at the drawing and smiled. "I think it's turning out perfect." If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave a comment, and check out our next story.